Ex-wife came crawling back after divorce. Hey, true story. My name is Corey Johnson, and you can go ahead and use my real name. I've been watching your channel for a little while now, and after hearing all these men share their experiences, I decided it's time I send mine in. I don't want you to read this one just yet, though, not until I send the follow-up. You'll understand why by the end of this email. This is the story of how my ex-wife came crawling back after divorce, but to really explain that, I've got to rewind the clock and take you through everything, the good, the bad, and the downright ugly. How we met. I met my ex-wife at my previous job. Back then, I was working for a mid-sized firm in the financial services sector. She was in the HR department, and I was on the client account side. I'll be honest with you, I wasn't even looking for a relationship at the time. I was just focused on building my career, making connections, and trying to get ahead. She was the one who kind of forced me to notice her, always stopping by my desk with a question she probably already knew the answer to, smiling a little too long, lingering in the break room whenever I happened to walk in. Eventually, I gave in and asked her out. From there, it just clicked. We went out a few times, had good conversations, good chemistry, and she seemed like the kind of woman who was ready to settle down, not just play games. We dated for about a year before things got serious enough for me to start thinking about engagement. By the time I actually proposed, I had already moved on to another firm. Let me pause here to say this. Leaving that company was not exactly my choice. Our boss, the same man who will play a huge role in this story, made my life hell once he realized how close she and I were getting. Looking back, it's obvious why. The boss situation. This man, our boss, was always a little too interested in her. Compliments that went beyond professional, hovering around her office, suddenly being very invested in her career development. At first, I brushed it off. I figured I was just being paranoid, but then I started noticing the way he looked at me, like I was in his way. We had disagreements that seemed to come out of nowhere. Suddenly, I couldn't do anything right in his eyes. Projects I worked on got nitpicked to death. Promotions I was up for disappeared. It didn't take a genius to figure out he wanted me gone. Eventually, I had no choice but to leave for my own sanity. I thought, okay, fine. At least I still have her, and we're building our own future together. What still gets me to this day is that she stayed. I told her flat out that I believed he had it out for me because of our relationship, that he was probably jealous, and that if the roles were reversed, I would have left in solidarity. Her excuse? She said she didn't want her resume looking unstable with too many job changes. She said she had to think about her career trajectory. That should have been my first red flag, but I ignored it. The wedding. Fast forward to the engagement and wedding. Let me tell you, it was big, too big. Extravagant is the only word for it. I'm more of a keep it simple, save money, and put it towards building a future kind of guy. But her? She was dead set on having the type of wedding you see on TV. I remember arguing with her over the budget. I thought we should scale back, maybe take that money and put it into a down payment for a house, or start talking about kids. She told me, word for word, we'll have time for all that later, but a wedding only happens once. Funny how that worked out. I let her win that battle because I was trying to keep the peace. So, we ended up with the giant hall, the catering, the DJ, the flowers, the endless photo shoots. It was beautiful, sure, but even on the day of, I couldn't shake the feeling that she cared more about showing off to everyone than actually being married to me. The change. 7 months. That's all it took for the mask to slip. About 7 months into the marriage, she started acting different, cold, snappy, always on her phone. It started with small things. She'd roll her eyes when I talked about my day. She stopped wanting to spend time together. Then it escalated to her outright saying things like, "Why are we living like poor people?" Mind you, We were doing just fine financially. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. We had a nice apartment, decent savings, no debt. But in her eyes, it wasn't enough. She started comparing me to other men, specifically my ex-boss. She would drop little comments about how so-and-so just built an addition on his house so his wife's parents could move in. She actually bragged about what another man was doing, and not just any man. My ex-boss, the same one who drove me out of that job. That didn't sit right with me. I didn't even argue back much. I just tucked that information away and started paying more attention. The phone. One night she was doing laundry and I just had this gut feeling. You know that sinking, stomach-turning feeling where something isn't adding up? I picked up her phone. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, but I didn't even have to dig. The evidence was all right there. Messages, pictures, the whole disgusting truth. She had been cheating on me with him the entire time we were married. Every excuse she ever gave me, every fight she started, every moment she pulled away. It all made sense in that moment. She had one foot out the door because she was busy living a double life. The confrontation? I confronted her that same night. I didn't yell. I didn't throw things. I just put the phone on the table and told her I knew. She tried to deny it for about 10 seconds, but the proof was overwhelming. Then she tried to spin it, saying she felt trapped in our marriage, that she needed more excitement, that she didn't mean for it to happen. I didn't want to hear it. I packed a bag, moved out, and filed for divorce the next week. The boss. At first, I wasn't going to go after him. I figured the best revenge was just moving on with my life, letting them both have each other. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized he ruined my career at that firm. He ruined my marriage, and he thought he could just get away with it. So, I decided if he wanted to play games, I'd play better. I won't go into the details just yet because that's what my follow-up email is going to cover. But let's just say I made sure his life didn't stay comfortable for long. The aftermath. As for her, the divorce went through, and she tried to act like she was fine without me. But the act didn't last. She started blowing up my phone, sending long paragraphs about how she loved me, how she made a mistake, how she wanted another chance. The irony of it all was too much for me. She didn't want to quit that job because she didn't want her resume looking unstable. Well, guess what? Eventually, that job ended up being the very thing that destroyed her. I'll get into all of that in part 2. An ex-colleague reached out and told me everything that went down, how she and the boss's wife got into it at work, how she looked like a fool, and how everything came crashing down on her. She wanted to come crawling back to me, but by then, I had already washed my hands of her. That's where I'm going to stop for now. Like I said, I don't want this email read until I send the follow-up, because the second half of this story is just as wild, if not wilder, than the first. Thanks for giving men a platform to share their stories. It feels good to finally put mine into words. Ex-wife came crawling back after divorce. Part 2. Hey, true story. It's Corey Johnson again. In my last email, I told you about how I met my ex-wife at my old job, how things escalated with the boss, how she betrayed me, and how I eventually found out she'd been cheating with him. I ended that email saying I'd send you the follow-up once everything was out in the open, and here it is. This is the part where I explain how I went after the boss, how everything came crashing down at their job, how my ex-wife ended up humiliated, and how she came crawling back to me after the divorce. The decision to ruin him. When I first left the marriage, I wasn't sure if I wanted revenge. Part of me thought it would be better to just focus on rebuilding myself and moving on. But the thing about betrayal is it sticks with you. It sits in your gut like a stone. This man had forced me out of my job, undermined my career, gone behind my back with my wife, and then paraded around like he'd won. I couldn't let him have the satisfaction. So I started paying attention. I still had a few good friends at that firm, people I could trust, and through them, I learned a lot. Like the fact that this guy had a habit of bending company policies whenever it suited him, or the fact that he and my ex weren't nearly as discreet as they thought. I didn't want to do anything illegal or cross any lines, but I did want to expose the truth. And trust me, once I started pulling on that thread, everything unraveled, gathering the information. The first thing I did was sit down with a buddy of mine who had left the firm a few months after I did. He had no loyalty to the boss and no problem telling me what he'd seen. He told me flat out that everyone in the office knew my ex and the boss were way too close. He also mentioned something interesting. Apparently, the boss had been submitting expense reports that didn't quite add up, taking clients out for dinners that never happened, charging things to the company that had nothing to do with work. That was my in. I asked my buddy to keep an eye out for anything else, and I started building a little file. I wasn't in a rush. I wanted to do this carefully. The ex-boss's wife. Now here's where it gets even more interesting. The boss was married. His wife wasn't some clueless woman sitting at home. She was sharp, involved, and very protective of her family. Through another colleague, word got back to me that she had started to suspect something. Apparently, she'd seen messages pop up on his iPad and asked questions he brushed off. That's when I realized I didn't have to do all the work myself. All I needed to do was make sure she had what she needed to see the truth. So one day, I anonymously mailed her a packet. Inside was a printout of a few messages between my ex and her husband. Yes, I had screenshotted plenty before I walked out. Nothing too explicit, but enough to raise eyebrows. I also included a note that said, "Check his expense reports against his travel. Things won't match up." I figured she could take it from there, and boy did she. The fallout at work. It didn't take long. A few weeks later, I got a text from one of my old coworkers. "Bro, you won't believe what just went down." Apparently, the boss's wife stormed into the office in the middle of the day. She confronted my ex in front of everyone, demanding to know if she thought she was special, if she really believed he would leave his family for her. My ex tried to deny it, but the wife had proof. She'd done exactly what I suggested and dug into his accounts, found inconsistencies, and cornered him until he admitted to some things. What made it worse was that the boss's wife didn't just confront my ex in private. She embarrassed her in front of half the office, yelling, throwing down papers, calling her names. My ex ended up leaving work early in tears. The boss himself wasn't spared either. HR got involved, upper management got wind of it, and suddenly his golden boy reputation crumbled. My ex-wife's begging. After that, it was like a switch flipped with her. Suddenly I wasn't the boring, broke, not good enough husband anymore. Suddenly I was the safe, stable man she wished she'd never left. She started texting me non-stop. At first, it was short things like, "Can we talk?" or "I miss you." I ignored them. Then it turned into paragraphs about how she made a mistake, how she never stopped loving me, how she got caught up in something stupid and wished she could take it back. One message said, "I love you. I always loved you. He meant nothing compared to you." It was laughable. This woman had torn me down for months, compared me to him, betrayed me, and now she wanted me back because her little fantasy world had collapsed. Her attempts to win me back. She tried everything. She showed up at my apartment one night, crying on my doorstep, begging me to let her in. She sent letters in the mail talking about how she wanted to start fresh. She even tried to go through my family, reaching out to my mom to plead her case. It was pathetic. My mom called me after one of those attempts and said, "Son, I don't know how you put up with her as long as you did. Don't let her back in." I didn't. Every time she reached out, I either ignored her or told her flatly that it was over. The boss's downfall. As for the boss, he didn't come out unscathed either. Word around the firm was that he got demoted and slapped with some kind of probation over his expenses. He wasn't fired, but his career took a big hit. His wife left him too. I don't know the exact details, but a colleague told me she moved out and took the kids. So there he was, career in shambles, family gone, reputation trashed. Exactly what he deserved. Moving on. As for me, I eventually transferred all that anger and energy into bettering myself. I started hitting the gym, focusing on my career at the new firm, and just enjoying life without the constant drama. I met new people, made new friends, and realized that my ex wasn't this special person I once thought she was. She was just another selfish, short-sighted person who blew up her own life. She came crawling back, but by then, I was already too far gone to even consider it. Final thoughts. True story, I wanted to send both parts of this email because I think it paints the full picture. Part 1 was about the betrayal, the pain, and the discovery. Part 2 is about the justice, the fallout, and the desperate crawling back that always seems to happen when people realize the grass isn't greener. If you decide to read this on the channel, I hope it helps another guy out there who's going through something similar. If there's one thing I learned, it's this. Never ignore the red flags. Never let anyone disrespect you, and never be afraid to walk away. Thanks for giving me the chance to share. Sincerely, Corey Johnson. Ex-wife came crawling back after divorce. Part 3. Final update. Hey, True Story. It's Corey Johnson again. This will probably be the last update I send in about my situation. The first 2 emails told the story of how I met my ex, the betrayal, the downfall of her and the boss, and how she came crawling back afterward. That part is done and over with. This email isn't really about her anymore. It's about me. It's about what happens after the dust settles. Because when I thought I was free, when I thought I'd already closed that chapter, I realized I was still carrying around a lot of things I hadn't really processed. Writing to you and sharing my story with people who actually understand has been therapeutic in itself. But I've also come to the point where I know I need something more. I've decided I'm going to get into therapy. Let me explain why. The weight of betrayal. When I caught my ex-wife cheating, it hit me like a freight train. Not just because of her betrayal, but because of the way it all unfolded. The gaslighting, the comparisons, the coldness, the way she looked at me like I wasn't enough. All of that triggered something deeper in me. I didn't realize it at first, but those feelings weren't new. They were old, buried feelings I had carried since I was a kid. Her words, her actions, they opened wounds that had never fully healed. That's why I've been thinking a lot about my childhood lately. Things I haven't spoken about in years. Things I thought I had moved past. Childhood memories I tried to forget. Growing up, my household wasn't the safest place emotionally. My dad wasn't really around much. He'd drift in and out, sometimes showing up with promises, other times disappearing for weeks. When he was there, he was either stone cold quiet or explosive. You never knew which version of him you were going to get. My mom was the glue holding everything together, but she was overworked and tired. She loved me, I know she did, but she didn't always have the emotional bandwidth to shield me from everything. I remember nights where I'd lie in bed, listening to my parents fighting in the other room, doors slamming, raised voices, the kind of atmosphere where you hold your breath, waiting to see if it'll pass or if it'll turn into something worse. I learned early to shrink myself, to stay quiet, to not rock the boat. If I kept my head down, maybe I'd avoid being yelled at or blamed for something I didn't do. That feeling of not being enough, of walking on eggshells, that stuck with me. School years. School wasn't exactly an escape either. I was a shy kid, awkward, and I got picked on for it. I wasn't the athletic type, I wasn't smooth with girls, and I didn't have much confidence. I can still remember the sting of being left out, classmates whispering, people laughing when I tried to join in. That stuff cuts deep when you're young. It makes you feel like an outsider, like you're invisible until it's time to be someone's joke. There were teachers who tried to encourage me, but it wasn't enough to drown out the noise of feeling small all the time, carrying it into adulthood. By the time I was an adult, I thought I had outgrown all of that. I had a career, I had stability, I had built a life for myself. I thought the shy, insecure kid was long gone. But when my ex-wife started with the little digs, rolling her eyes, calling us poor people, comparing me to my ex-boss, it hit the same nerve that had been tender since I was 10 years old. I didn't just hear my wife criticizing me. I heard every bully who ever mocked me. I heard my dad telling me I wasn't enough. I heard every voice from my past confirming the lie that I wasn't worthy of love or respect. That's what betrayal does. It doesn't just hurt in the present. It reopens all the scars you thought you buried. Why I'm seeking therapy. I've realized that even though I got through the divorce, even though I moved on, even though I didn't take her back when she begged, I still haven't fully healed. I'm not ashamed to admit that there are nights I still feel that same knot in my stomach. There are days where I look in the mirror and question if I'll ever really be enough for anyone. And as much as I hate to say it, I don't want to carry those feelings into whatever future relationship I might have. I owe it to myself and to the next person I choose to love to be healthy, to not project my old wounds onto new people, to not live with bitterness or paranoia. That's why I've decided to seek therapy, not because I'm broken, but because I'm human, because I want to grow, because I want to stop letting the past control me. One of the hardest truths I've had to face is that my ex-wife's betrayal wasn't really about me. It was about her selfishness, her choices, her inability to value what she had. But as a man, it's easy to internalize it, to make it mean I wasn't good enough, to let it validate every negative thing you already believed about yourself. I've been unpacking that. I've been reminding myself that her actions say more about her character than they ever could about mine. But that's not easy work. It takes time. It takes honesty. And sometimes it takes a professional guiding you through it. Gratitude for this platform. I want to take a second to thank you, True Story. I know you probably get hundreds of emails, but for me, even just writing mine has been therapeutic. There's something powerful about putting words to your pain, about sharing your story instead of keeping it bottled up, about knowing other men will hear it and maybe think, I'm not alone. That's what your channel does. It reminds us we're not alone. It gives us a space to be honest without judgment. That in itself is therapy. Looking ahead. I don't know exactly what the future holds. Maybe I'll meet someone new down the line. Maybe I won't. But I do know that whoever I become after this, I want him to be stronger, healthier, and more at peace than the man who got cheated on and betrayed. I want to rebuild myself not just externally with career and fitness, but internally, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. For the first time in a long time, I feel hopeful about that. Final thoughts. If there are any men out there listening to this who are going through something similar, I just want to say, don't be afraid to get help. Don't let pride stop you. Don't carry wounds from childhood into your adult relationships without addressing them. Cheating, betrayal, divorce. These things cut deep, but sometimes they also shine a light on places in you that still need healing. That's what I've learned. That's what I'm working on. And that's the journey I'm choosing for myself now. Thanks again for letting me share.